Oh my gosh, you guys. I have a new favorite trail in Colorado. I am overjoyed right now. I'm having the best day, the absolute best day. I'm at one of the Missouri lakes right now. So I'm doing a loop. It's about 11 miles. It's like Missouri Lakes and Fancy Lake. And I started at the Missouri Lake Trailhead, although it's literally right next to the Fancy Lake Trailhead. I parked at the Fancy Lake Trailhead because there are a bunch of rocks right by the Missouri one that would have been harder to park over there, but it's a loop and I'm not even like halfway through my hike. I'm at the first Missouri lake and I have not seen any other people until I got to this lake. There are like 3 people across the lake. There are so many interesting things to look at. It's so freaking pretty. It's like streams and really interesting like avalanche fields. Shout out to the volunteers or the conservation crew, whoever it is that maintains this trail, because they cut a trail through this giant avalanche field. It's totally crazy. It's obviously not a very old trail. Like, they've been chainsawing trees, and so shout out to whoever that is. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Beautiful mountains to look at, wildflowers everywhere. I've had the trail to myself all morning. I'm just in heaven, and I can't express how much I am absolutely loving this trail. And like I said, I'm not even halfway through. Oh, hi, let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Audrey. On trail, I'm known as Glow Stick. In 2018, I quit my amazing job in Washington, D.C., through hike the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine, and then I moved to Colorado, where life is wonderful, and I get to do this stuff on my weekends and my days off, and guys, I'm just having the best day ever. But anyway, you should subscribe to my channel if you're into hiking and backpacking, want to know more about the AT, want to know about more hikes in Colorado. And I'm going to take you along on the hiking trail and show you what there is to see and talk more about this trail. And guys, I'm just so happy. I'm just so happy. Anyway, I hope you're having the best day, because I'm having the absolute best day, and I highly, highly recommend this trail, the Missouri Lakes Trail. All right, let's get into the hike.
Okay, first and foremost, be forewarned that you have to drive down a dirt road to get here. Actually, 2 dirt roads to get here. And the second of those dirt roads is a pretty rough road. Although I called the wilderness office ahead of time because I was reading mixed things online as to whether any type of car could drive out there. I have a tiny little Ford Focus. It's not a 4-wheel drive. It's not high clearance. So I was like, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be able to make it in my car. And I was reading mixed things online. Like, some people were saying, like, no way could a car make it out there. Other people were saying, like, oh, it's not that bad. So I called the wilderness office and asked, and they said it's graded for any type of car. So any type of car can get out there. And I found that to be true. There were some potholes and divots and rocks. I had to take it pretty slow sometimes, but my car made it just fine. It's just that at the beginning of the trail, so at the trailhead, like I said, the Missouri Lakes Trailhead and the Fancy Lake Trailhead are right next to each other, and I would not have been able to drive down to the Missouri Lakes Trailhead, but I literally just parked at Fancy Lake and walked over to the Missouri Lakes Trailhead because that is where I wanted to start. I wanted to go clockwise. So it is totally doable to get out here in any type of vehicle, in my opinion, as long as you take it slow and steady and you're careful. Anyway, this trail is in the White River National Forest in the Holy Cross Wilderness. It's probably about an hour from Vail, Colorado, and about an hour from Leadville, Colorado. It's pretty out there. And like I said, you have to drive several miles on 2 dirt roads in order to get to the trailhead, but it is so worth it. And these dirt roads are national forest roads. So I went out the night before and just camped for free in a dispersed camping spot on one of these national forest roads. So if you're coming from Denver, you're coming from Boulder, it's a pretty long drive. So if you want to get out there the night before and camp out, it's easy to do that. So it's about a 3-hour drive from Boulder and about a 2.5-hour drive from Denver if you're lucky enough not to get stuck in any traffic. According to All Trails, this trail is 11.5 miles and it is a loop. So it's not an out and back, although if you want to make it shorter, you don't want to do the entire thing, you can make it an out and back and either just do Fancy Lake or just do Missouri Lakes. If you were to do that, I would recommend just doing Missouri Lakes rather than Fancy Lake because there's a lot more to see on the Missouri Lakes side of the trail. I thought it was a way more interesting side of the trail. And with that being said, I would also recommend going clockwise, starting at the Missouri Lakes trailhead and ending at the Fancy Lake trailhead for that reason. On the way up to Missouri Lakes, there is so much interesting stuff to see, like rushing creeks and little waterfalls and this gigantic avalanche field. Tons of wildflowers if you're there in the right season, little creeks that you have to cross, lots of stuff so that it never gets boring, beautiful mountain views. Whereas the Fancy Lake side, after I hit Fancy Lake, the trail got to be a little bit boring and it was mostly just a forested trail, which of course there's nothing wrong with a forested trail, but I just didn't think that side past Fancy Lake was as pretty as this whole side leading up to the Missouri Lakes. Note that this trail is rated as hard. The elevation gain over 11.5 miles is 2,647 feet. And personally, I think seeing the trail, I went clockwise. You could go counterclockwise as well. I think that clockwise is probably the easier way to do the trail. So unless you're really looking to push yourself and you want to do the more difficult way, I would say again that I think clockwise is really the way to go, starting at Missouri Lakes Trailhead and ending at the Fancy Lake Trailhead. Along the trail, you pass a bunch of alpine lakes, like several. I saw so many marmots hanging out in all of these little rocky areas. They love those, as well as some pikas. You have to go up and over 2 mountain passes. The first one, I'm not sure if it has a name. I'm sure that it does, but I'm not sure what it is. But the second one you go over, if you're going clockwise, is Fancy Pass, and that is the big guy. That's the big mountain pass to go over. And it was, a little bit difficult because you are above tree line, like you're up at pretty high elevation, but it's definitely doable. And once you get to the top of Fancy Pass, and even the leading up Fancy Pass, the views are just freaking incredible. So even though this is a hard trail, it's just so spectacular that it never feels like you're doing too much work. It's like you're so excited to get to the next thing. Like there's so many beautiful things to look at. So even when you're going uphill, it doesn't really matter. Like take a break, look around you, and it's just like, how do I get to be here right now? And for me, like, how do I get to live in this state? How do I get to live in Colorado? It's freaking amazing. Anyway, I hiked this. It's almost mid-July. And there was still some snow on the trail up on those 2 passes. The first pass, which I'm guessing is a lower elevation pass because it was much easier than Fancy Pass, there was just a tiny little patch of snow that I had to walk through. But then once I got over Fancy Pass, there was actually this giant snowfield that I could have walked through, but I met some really, really freaking cool women who were on their way down from Fancy Pass as I was headed up Fancy Pass, and they recommended that I walk around it on the rocks, on the boulders, because it would be safer. So I followed their advice. So to those 2 women, if they ever happen to land upon my video for some reason, thank you for the advice. I followed it. And you guys made my day with your awesome vibes. Anyway, that is to say that if you're not used to hiking in Colorado, we could have any kind of weather at any time, and the snow sticks around pretty late in the season when you're up at high elevation, up high in the mountains. So just be prepared at all times. I even keep my micro spikes in my hiking bag almost all year round. I didn't have to get them out and use them for this because the snow is pretty wet and like slushy, but I think it's always better to be prepared, of course. And I always hike with trekking poles, which I know they look a little bit nerdy, but I'm obsessed with them and they've saved my life so many times and they make my life so much easier while hiking, especially when you're hiking on super rocky trails or you're hiking through snow, or even like it helps my knees not be bothered quite so much, going down hills, all that good stuff. Anyway, once you get over Fancy Pass, obviously you have a spectacular view of the mountains, and then you end up at your very last lake, which is Fancy Lake. And I should also mention that you can camp out here, you can backpack, you just have to self-register at the trailhead that you're going to be out backpacking, but you don't need to pay for a special permit in advance or anything. I'll put some more information about that and the wilderness regulations in this area down in the show notes. I'll definitely be returning to this trail, there's no doubt about it.
Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I can't express enough how much I love this trail. Don't forget to give it a like, drop a comment if you've done this trail before or you'd like to do it in the future. That really helps my engagement to get videos out to more and more people. Don't forget to subscribe for more hiking and backpacking content. Thank you guys for all the support. Have a wonderful day and happy hiking.